He knelt with a baby in his arms and made a request that silenced even the cruelest tongues. Before the woman everyone called barren, he saw a mother, a home, and a chance for a new beginning. What happened next will move you. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. The mud house stood at the edge of the Ceará backlands, where the huazero tree rarely provided shade, and birds of prey circled the sky without landing. It was there that Joanna lived, without children, without a husband, without hope. Ever. Since she had been called a barren woman by the women of the Ibiapina settlement, she had learned to live between thin walls and downcast eyes. Aloisio had left 6 years earlier, after 10 failed attempts to conceive, saying he needed a name that wouldn't die with him. Since then, the silence of the house had been her only company. The neighbors crossing the mud paths stayed far away, as if the inability to bear children could be caught like a disease. Joanna continued with her skinny chickens and a goat with thin milk, aging without witnesses, except for the faded plaster saints in the oratory. The packed earth floor of her house creaked under her solitary steps as she bent down to light the wood stove every morning without purpose. What kept her alive? Perhaps pure northeastern stubbornness, the kind that doesn't allow us to leave life's bone before the right time. It was on a morning of warm wind that everything changed. Joanna was in the yard when she heard the hesitant trot approaching. It sounded tired, as if it had come from very far away. A horse with dusty fur and protruding ribs crossed the gate of her fence, carrying a man. Sebastião Piraguibe, a Potiguara indigenous man known for his medicinal herbs and rare words. Black hair, angular face, eyes that seemed to hold ancestral secrets. He was thinner than Joanna remembered seeing him at the trading fairs. In his arms he carried a bundle that moved slightly, a baby wrapped in a patchwork blanket. A child, thought Joanna, feeling her heart beat strangely, as if she had forgotten what it felt like to expect something good from life. Sebastião dismounted with difficulty. The man seemed to have traveled for days without rest. He approached unhurriedly but with determination, like someone who knows exactly what needs to be done. He stopped at Joanna's door. He knelt on the dry earth without hesitation. Sweat ran down his dark face as the baby stirred in his arms. The child needs a mother. I need honor. You need purpose. Joanna said nothing immediately. Her gaze alternated between the man and the child. How long had it been since she had felt another human being seeking something from her? Where does this child come from, Sebastião? She finally asked. Her voice cracked like the earth in times of drought. From the fire in the Tapeba village. The mother is gone. The father too. Only she remains. The baby was a girl. Small, fragile, with large dark eyes that stared at Joanna without blinking. Why me? There are many women throughout this backland. Sebastião remained kneeling. You know how to heal with herbs. You know how to speak with the spirits of the earth. And you need her as much as she needs you. That afternoon, as the sun began its slow descent over the Mandakaru cacti, Joanna opened the door. Sebastião entered with the child. At the kitchen table, he told her that the fire had destroyed almost everything in the small village. The girl had been found protected by a hollow trunk that had not completely burned. A survivor. What's her name? Asked Joanna, observing the tiny hands of the baby. She doesn't have one yet. In our traditions, the child receives a name when she's ready. Days later, the settlement found out, and the news spread like water in a dry riverbed. The barren woman is going to raise a child now, said Donna Severina at the church door. What will she feed her with, wind and dust? Mocked Teresa do Açude. The cruel words reached Joanna's ears like stones thrown at her door, but every time she looked at the little girl's face, something inside her grew stronger. An ancient primitive force that had nothing to do with blood or the ability to give birth. One day, while feeding the baby goat milk from an improvised bottle, Sebastião appeared again. This time, he wasn't alone. He brought with him Urema, a tribal elder. The old woman, with white hair and skin as wrinkled as an ancient juazeiro bark, approached Joanna with slow steps. Without asking permission, she touched the baby's forehead and then Joanna's. This is a child of fire, born twice, First from the womb of the mother who departed, then from the flames that did not consume her. And you, her deep eyes fixed on. Joanna, you are a woman of waiting. Your womb did not bear, but your hands can create. That night, under the light of the bonfire lit in Joanna's yard, the small indigenous community held a simple ceremony. Joanna received a seed necklace and the blessing of the elders. There she wasn't the woman who couldn't bear children. She was the woman who chose to love. And when the baby was placed in her arms during the ritual, Joanna felt something she had never experienced before. Belonging. A new beginning was germinating in that arid land, like the mandakaru flower that only appears when everyone has already lost hope in the rain. The first months were the most difficult. Jassi, as the girl was baptized during the ceremony, a name that meant moon in the Tupi language, cried all night. Joanna lost herself between improvised cloth diapers and manioc broths to thicken the goat's milk. Her hands, accustomed to weaving lace and planting in the dry yard, now learned the movement of cradling, of cleaning small wounds, of caressing to calm sudden fevers. The settlement watched from a distance, between low laughter and disdainful glances. She'll give up soon. Teresa do asudibet, when the women gathered to wash clothes. She has no milk in her breast, no mother's patience, and that little Indian will end up really getting sick. Meanwhile, the drought intensified. That year of 1958 promised to be one of the worst the backlands had ever faced. The reservoir was visibly receding, cattle were beginning to die in the fields, and even the most resistant cacti seemed to bow under the weight of the merciless. Sardan Sebastian appeared every fortnight, bringing medicinal herbs and sometimes a little flour or rapadura sugar. He never stayed more than a few hours. His eyes followed Jassi's growth with silent interest, but he maintained distance from Joanna, as if afraid of crossing some invisible boundary. During one of these visits, when the girl had already completed 6 months, he also brought disturbing news. Landowner Euclides Mendonça is saying that you stole the child. Joanna felt her blood freeze in her veins. Euclides was the most powerful man in the region, owner of half the lands around the settlement, and a friend of the Ibiapina sheriff. What do you mean, stole? Everyone knows where Hassi came from. He said that Indian children should stay with Indians or go to an orphanage in the capital. He's saying he'll contact the Indian Protection Service. Terror took hold of Joanna. She knew what it meant for the SPI to get involved in this story. Jassi would be taken far away, perhaps to an orphanage in Fortaleza, where no one would know her origins, her stories, the meaning of her name. Or worse, she would be given to some rich family as a servant, like so many indigenous children Joanna had heard about. That night, as she rocked Jassi in the hammock, anxiety kept her from sleeping. The girl was already part of her. In the 6 months that had passed, every toothless smile, every small achievement, holding her head up, turning to the side, recognizing her face, had been like water on dry land. How could she allow them to take her away? 2 days later, the situation worsened. Donna Severina knocked on her door early in the morning. Her expression was grave, her lips pressed into a thin line. Joanna, I came to warn you. Euclides said at the store that he's going to send the sheriff here on the next full moon. He says a child needs a real family, not a barren woman playing at being a mother. The words were like lashes. Real family. As if love could be measured by the ability to give birth. As if Hassi hadn't flourished under her care despite all the negative predictions. And you, Severina? Did you come to laugh at my misfortune too? The older woman lowered her eyes. For the first time, Joanna noticed that there was something different about her. It wasn't scorn she saw on her face, but concern. I came because I know what it's like to lose a child. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Joanna hesitated. Everyone in the settlement knew that Severina's son had left for São Paulo more than a decade ago and had never sent news. If the sheriff comes, I have no way to stop him. He has the law on his side. The law of men, Joanna, but there are other laws, older ones. Severina took a small package from inside her dress. It was a scapular, the kind that northeastern mothers place around children's necks to protect them. Put it on her. And look for midwife Antonia in Serra da Capivara. She knows the ancient paths. As the woman walked away, Joanna stood holding the small amulet. The line of unexpected allies was beginning to form. At nightfall, another surprising visitor arrived. Father Zé do Terreiro, the healer who lived on the fringes of the settlement, rarely seen in daylight. He was a tall man, with skin as dark as strong coffee, yellowish eyes, and enormous hands. People said he talked with the spirits of the forests and knew all the secrets the backlands hid. "I came to see the fire girl," he said simply as he stood at the door. Joanna hesitated. She had never frequented Father Zé's terreiro. She had always followed the Catholic prayers she had learned from her mother. But something in the man's eyes made her give way. He entered and went straight to the small hammock where Yassi slept. He didn't touch the child, just observed her for long moments. "This girl has a destiny, Joanna of the Drought. It's not by chance that she survived the fire and ended up in your arms." He took a small gourd from his pocket and handed it to Joanna. "Water from the golden Serra fountain. Give her 3 drops with each new moon. It will strengthen her bones and spirit." Before leaving, he looked steadily at Joanna. "And you, woman, need to find your own strength. A mother's power doesn't reside in the womb, but in the chest and hands." That week, while the sheriff's threat loomed over them like a storm cloud that doesn't break, Joanna noticed that something had changed in the settlement. The women no longer averted their gaze so much when she passed with JC in her arms. Some even nodded discreetly. It was as if an invisible current was forming. One afternoon, when she returned from fetching water at the well, she found a small package at her door. Inside were new cloth diapers carefully sewn. There was no note or signature, but Joanna recognized the typical embroidery of Maria de Lourdes, one of the few women who could read and write in the settlement. The day before, the full moon, Sebastião appeared again. This time he didn't come alone. He brought with him a middle-aged man with graying hair and a severe look, whom Joanna recognized as Bonifacio Tupinamba, representative of the indigenous peoples to the state government. "He came to help," explained Sebastião as they entered Joanna's simple house. Bonifacio examined the documents that Sebastião had provided, an informal record of Hasi's origin, with testimonies from survivors of the fire. "It's not much, but it may be enough to prevent them from taking the girl by force. However, we need more support. Euclides has influence even in the capital." That was when Joanna made a decision. She placed Hasi in Sebastião's lap, who seemed surprised by the sudden gesture of trust. "Take care of her for a few hours. I have something to do." Joanna walked the almost 2 kilometers that separated her house from Euclides Mendonça's farm. The sun was beginning to set, coloring the sky orange and red, as if the firmament itself were in flames. Her legs, trembling from effort and fear, carried her along that dusty road she had so often avoided. Bom Destino Farm was the largest property in the region. It was said that its lands went as far as the eye could see from the top of the hill. The large white house with blue windows, with its spacious porch and well-tended garden, contrasted cruelly with the simple houses of the settlement. Joanna stopped at the main gate, hesitant. 2 maids sweeping the entrance observed her with curiosity. "Looking for someone, ma'am?" one of them asked, approaching cautiously. "I need to speak with Donna Vittoria," replied Joanna, referring to Euclides' wife. The maid frowned. "The mistress doesn't usually receive. Tell her it's Joanna of the Drought. She'll know who I am." Minutes later, to the maid's surprise, Donna Vittoria personally appeared on the porch, ordering them to let Joanna in. She was an imposing woman, nearly 60, with grey hair tied in a severe bun and penetrating blue eyes. She wore a simple dress but of fine fabric and a rosary wrapped around her wrist. "It's been a while, Joanna," she said, indicating a chair on the porch. "Would you like some coffee?" Joanna shook her head. Her stomach was too tight to accept. "Anything." "Donna Vittoria, I came to talk about the child." The lady sighed, sitting across from her. "I know, Euclides is determined to intervene. He says it's a matter of principles." "What principles allow tearing a child from those who love her?" Donna Vittoria gazed at the horizon for a few moments before answering. "You know that in this land the rules are clear. Indian with Indian, white with white, besides a woman alone with your condition." Blood rushed to Joanna's face. My condition. You know better than anyone what you're talking about. Silence weighed between the two women. An old story, never openly mentioned, hung in the air. 16 years earlier, Joanna had been employed in that same house. At just 15, naive and frightened, she worked in the kitchen when she caught the attention of Augusto, Euclides and Vittoria's eldest son. The young man, newly returned from his studies in Recife, didn't take long to corner the young maid in the dark corners of the big house. What happened next was hushed up with the Mendonça family's money and power. Joanna, violated and then discarded, was sent back home with a small sum and the veiled threat that something worse would happen if she spoke. Months later, when her belly began to grow, came the high fever, the blood running down her legs, and the midwife's diagnosis. You lost the child and may never be able to have another. Donna Vittoria lowered her eyes. That was a long time ago, Joanna. Time doesn't erase everything, Mom. Your son took away my chance to be a mother, and now your husband wants to take away the only daughter fate has given me. Joanna's voice trembled, but her eyes remained dry, fixed on those of the other woman. Euclides doesn't know about this story. I never told him, but you know, and you also know what it's like to lose a son. Augusto had died a few years earlier in a car accident on the road to Fortaleza. What do you want from me, Joanna? I want you to stop your husband. Tell him, you know my character, that you know I'm capable of raising Hasi. You have influence over him. Donna Vittoria stood up, walking to the porch railing. From there, one could see the small family cemetery, where a white tombstone marked Augusto's grave. I have one condition, she finally said. I want to meet the girl. I want to see her with my own eyes before I intercede. The next day, at 3 o'clock sharp, a carriage stopped in front of Joanna's mud house. From it descended Donna Vittoria, alone, dressed with unusual simplicity for her position. Joanna waited for her in the yard, with Jaci in her arms. The girl was wearing her best little dress, made of colorful scraps that Joanna had sewn in her few free hours. Her black straight hair had been carefully combed, and around her neck the scapula that Severina had given her. She looks like you, said Donna Vittoria, after observing the child for long moments. Not in the face, but in the gaze. She has the same determination. Joanna allowed the lady to take Jaci in her arms. The girl, normally skittish with strangers, fixed her dark eyes on Donna Vittoria's, and to Joanna's amazement smiled. As Joanna prepared coffee on the wood stove, she watched from the corner of her eye the interaction between the rich lady and the little mestiza. There was something almost sacred in the way those two souls communicated without words, the woman who had lost her son and the child who had lost her blood parents. I'll talk to Euclides, said Donna Vittoria, as she said goodbye. I can't promise anything, but I'll do what I can. 3 days later, on the eve of the full moon, when the sheriff was supposed to appear, it was Euclides himself who emerged on the dirt path leading to Joanna's house. He came on horseback, imposing on his expensive mount, his wide-brimmed hat protecting his face from the unrelenting sun. Joanna felt her heart race. Instinctively, she pressed Jaci against her chest and retreated inside the house. To her surprise, Sebastião and Bonifacio appeared from the back trail, as if they had sensed danger. Be calm, said Sebastião, positioning himself beside her. We are no longer alone. Indeed, something unusual began to happen. From various directions, people from the settlement approached. Severina, Father Zé, Maria de Lourdes, and other women Joanna barely knew. Even Father Joaquim, who rarely left the church, came walking slowly, leaning on his cane. It was as if a silent army was forming around the small mud house. Euclides, dismounted, visibly disturbed by that unexpected reception. His eyes scanned the determined faces that stared at him. I've come to see the Indian child, he announced, trying to maintain authority in his voice. For what reason, Mr. Euclides? Asked the priest, stepping forward. His calm voice contrasted with the tension of the moment. To ensure that she's being well cared for, of course. It is my duty as a respectable citizen of this community. Your duty, Father Zé's voice sounded grave and deep. Since when do you care about Indian children? How many of them work on your farm without receiving anything but food? A murmur of agreement ran through the group. Euclides adjusted his hat, visibly uncomfortable. This is different. This child has a name, interrupted Joanna, advancing with Hasi in her arms. Her name is Jassi, and she already has a family. Sebastian placed himself next to Joanna, his silent presence conveying a strength she had never felt before. It was as if at that moment, something new was beginning to be born. Not just the protection of Chasey, but something between the two of them, still indefinable, fragile as a new shoot, but persistent as the root of an umbuzero tree. My wife. Told me your story, Joanna, said Euclides, lowering his voice. I didn't come to take the girl from you. The shock was visible on everyone's face. I came to bring this. He extended an envelope. It's a declaration signed by me, the sheriff, and the priest, recognizing you and Sebastião as the child's legal guardians. It's not an official adoption. That would have to be done in the capital, but it's enough to prevent any government interference. Joanna took the envelope with trembling hands. Why? Was all she could ask. Euclides looked at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set. Let's say I learned that some debts from the past need to be paid. He mounted his horse again. Oh, and Vittoria sent this for the girl. He handed a small package to Sebastião. She said it was hers when she was a child. Inside was a small silver bracelet with a moon-shaped pendant. The rains finally came to the backlands 3 months later, bringing new life to the punished land. The Mandakaru cacti flowered, the reservoir began to fill again, and a timid hope sprouted in the hearts of the backlanders. Yasi completed her first year of life during the first storm. The water that fell in torrents on the straw roof seemed to celebrate along with the small family that had formed against all odds. The settlement, which had previously observed with scorn, now watched with curiosity the unfolding of that improbable story. The birthday ceremony was simple but meaningful. In the yard of the house, now green with new grass, gathered not only members of the indigenous community who had welcomed Joanna as one of their own, but also some residents of the settlement. The aroma of fresh food and herbs perfumed the air, mixing with the smell of wet earth. The children from the village ran through the yard, their laughter echoing like music. Severina brought a corn cake, decorated with small wildflowers picked at dawn. Maria de Lourdes appeared with a new little dress for Hasi, sewn with colorful cotton fabric scraps, each piece chosen with special care. Even Donna Vittoria sent a gift, a small gold medallion with the image of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, a piece that had belonged to her own mother. To protect the girl, said the note written in elegant calligraphy. Sebastião, who had gradually become a constant presence in the house, had built a special hammock for Hasi, using colored fibers that symbolized protection in his people's traditions. Each knot had been made with a silent prayer. Each interweaving carried a wish for strength and wisdom for the little one. That afternoon, while the rain gave a truce and a rainbow cut across the backland sky, something unexpected happened. Father Zay, who rarely participated in celebrations, appeared bringing with him a young man of about 20. The young man had the same yellowish eyes as the healer and carried in his hands a small APACHE drum carved with ancestral symbols. This is my son Tonho, Father Zay introduced. He has the gift of vision. The young man approached Hasi, who was playing sitting on a mat on the ground. For a few moments, he just observed her in silence, his penetrating eyes studying the child as one reads a sacred book. Then he began to play the APACHE softly. The rhythm was hypnotic, ancestral, evoking something that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. The elders of the village recognized the beat. It was the call of the ancestors, rarely performed, reserved for moments of great significance. This girl, said Tonho, his voice surprisingly deep for someone so young, will unite the worlds that the white man separated. She will grow with her feet on 2 lands and her heart in many traditions. He looked at Joanna and Sebastião, who were side by side. And you two will be the bridge she will cross to find her own path. The words hung in the air like the smoke from the incense that Jurema had lit. No one dared to break them with trivial comments. There was a truth in them that everyone felt, even without fully understanding. At night, when the guests had left and Hasi finally fell asleep, lulled by the sounds of the rain that had returned to fall gently, Joanna and Sebastião sat on the doorstep, observing the stars that shone intensely between the scattered clouds. The silence between them was no longer awkward, but comfortable, like that of people who have learned to share the essential without words. "Do you think it's true?" Joanna finally asked, what Tonho said about Hasi uniting worlds. Sebastião contemplated the sky for a few moments before answering, his profile cut against the night like an ancient indigenous engraving. "My people believe that children born from great tragedies carry the spirit of the ancestors who protected them. Hasi survived the fire. She was embraced by the earth when they placed her in the hollow trunk, and now she is loved by people of different origins. If that isn't uniting worlds, I don't know what would be." He hesitated before continuing, his fingers drumming softly on the worn wood of the doorstep. "Joanna, I want to ask you something." She felt her heart inexplicably accelerate. "What is it?" "In my village, when a man and a woman raise a child together, even if it's not of their blood, they become family before the community. They don't need to live in the same hut or share the same mat, but they have a commitment to each other." Sebastião's dark eyes fixed on hers. "I would like to make that commitment with you, not as husband and wife the way your people understand it, but as partners in raising Hasi, as family." Joanna felt something warm spread through her chest. It wasn't passion, nor desire, feelings she thought had died within her many years ago. It was something deeper, more lasting, trust, respect, and perhaps with time a love different from any she had ever known. "I accept," she replied simply. There was no kiss, no embrace, no grand promises, just a silent agreement, sealed under the stars of the backlands, witnessed only by the wind that whispered among the leaves of the huazero tree. In the years that followed, the settlement of Ibiapina witnessed a gradual transformation. The unusual partnership between the barren woman and the Potiguara indigenous man opened doors that had previously remained closed. Sebastião began to attend to people from the settlement with his medicinal herbs, curing ailments that doctors from the big city couldn't even name. His fame spread, and soon people came from distant places in search of his skillful hands and ancestral knowledge. Joanna, in turn, began to teach the craft of lace to the young women of the village, her patient, fingers guiding less experienced hands between bobbins and pins. Secular barriers began to dissolve, like stones worn by persistent water. Hasi grew up between these two worlds, absorbing the best of each. By the age of 5, she already spoke Portuguese and the Potiguara language with equal fluency, transitioning between languages as one crosses a familiar bridge. She knew the stories of Catholic saints told by Joanna during winter nights, and the indigenous legends that Sebastião narrated by the fire on starry nights. Her small fingers were skilled both for weaving lace and for braiding fibers into traditional baskets. There was in her an insatiable curiosity, a thirst for knowledge that seemed never to be quenched, and, most importantly, a heart that saw no differences, only possibilities. One morning, when Hasi had already completed 7 years, an unexpected figure appeared on the road. It was Aloisio, the husband who had left so many years ago in search of a name that wouldn't die with him. He was older, thinner, with his face marked by the sun and time, like a map of the wrong paths he had taken. The worn hat in his hands betrayed years of hard work and broken dreams. He stopped at the fence, observing the girl who played in the yard, building small mud houses with the skill of one who already knows the value of a home. "Joanna," he called, his voice hoarse with emotion or perhaps shame. She came out of the house, drying her hands on her apron. For a moment she stood paralyzed, as if seeing a ghost. "Aloisio." It wasn't a question, nor an exclamation, just the statement of a fact that, surprisingly, no longer caused pain. "I came back," he said, taking off his hat in a gesture that mixed respect and supplication. "I heard that you have a daughter now." His eyes rested on Hasi, who observed the stranger with curiosity without fear. I came to see if—" He didn't complete the sentence, but the meaning was clear in his imploring eyes. Joanna didn't respond immediately. She looked at her daughter, who now ran to call Sebastião, who worked in the back garden humming an old Potiguara song. "You can come in and have coffee," she finally said, "as a visitor. This house already has a man." When Sebastião appeared, with Yassi clinging to his leg like a small sentinel, there was a moment of tension. The two men measured each other in silence, recognizing in each other what they represented: past and present, abandonment and permanence. "Sebastião, this is Aloisio. He's passing through." The emphasis on the last word was subtle but unequivocal. Indigenous man nodded, extending his hand in a firm gesture that allowed no dubious interpretations. After coffee, served in an awkward silence, Aloisio said goodbye. Before leaving, he looked one last time at Joanna like someone who finally understands the value of what he lost. "You seem happy." There was genuine astonishment in his voice. "I'm at peace," she replied. "It's not always the same thing, but it's what matters." He nodded, put on his hat, and left by the same dusty road that had brought him. Joanna didn't watch him walk away. Instead, she turned to her real family, not the one blood had determined, but the one her heart had chosen. The following year, the settlement of Ibiapina witnessed something unprecedented: the first joint celebration between its residents and the indigenous community of the region. It was held in the yard of Joanna and Sebastião's house, now expanded to accommodate the family that was growing not in number but in meaning. There was food typical of both cultures, music that mixed ancestral rhythms and backcountry songs, dances that celebrated both the harvest and the spirits of the earth. At the center of everything, connecting worlds with her radiant existence, was Hasi, the girl born of fire, raised by love, blessed by two traditions. When Hasi turned 10, something extraordinary happened. The settlement and the village united to build a school where children from both communities could study together. They named it New Hope School, and its exposed brick walls, raised by white and indigenous hands, became a symbol of a barrier that had crumbled. The first teacher was Maria de Lourdes, who now learned about medicinal herbs from Sebastião and about ancestral stories from Jurema. Parents who previously wouldn't allow their children to sit next to little Indians now shared meals and knowledge. And Joanna? She became the storyteller, the one who brought to the children the legends of both worlds, showing that they didn't need to be separate. Her words, once silenced by pain, now wove bridges between generations and cultures. On an afternoon of celebration at the school, old Father Joaquim, now with completely white hair, blessed the union of the communities. By his side was Father Zay, his hands raised in silent prayer. And it was Shasi who read the first poem, written by herself, speaking about bridges that are built not with wood or stone, but with acceptance and love. That night, returning home, under the starry sky of the backlands, Hasi walked ahead while Joanna and Sebastião followed hand in hand. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Regret what?" "Opening the door that day." Joanna looked at the daughter who skipped ahead, then at the man by her side, and finally at the community they were leaving behind, no longer divided, but united by invisible and powerful bonds that they had helped to weave. How could I regret finding my path? In the settlement of Ibiapina, Joanna was no longer known as the barren one. Now they called her she who made things sprout without planting. And in the small mud house at the edge of the backlands, where once there was only silence, now echoed laughter, stories, and songs. An unlikely family flourished like a mandakaru after the rain, resilient, unexpected, gloriously alive. If this narrative touched your heart as Joanna's love transformed lives in the backlands, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments which moment of this journey resonated most with you. Just as Jasi united different worlds,